Welcome to the joy of coding.
Hello, and welcome to episode 286 of The Joy of Coding. I'm Mike Conley. It's so good to have you here. We're going to be hacking on some Firefox stuff today. Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be a great time. Let's check it out. Let me start by sharing my screen. Scooby-Doo. Here we go. So, it's April 13th, 2022, episode 286. A reminder, no plan survives breakfast. I think I know what I want to do today. I kind of have a sense of how things are going to progress, but it might not go according to plan. I don't have the solutions in the back of my head for a lot of this stuff, or any of this stuff, really. So you're going to be watching me stumble around, exploring stuff, getting stuck, getting confused, and that's okay. That's all part of the name of the game here. This is live coding. It's not prepared in advance. The second thing is that the agenda that we're looking at is something you have access to in the event that you want to click on any links or something. If you're watching this on YouTube, check out the video description for the link to the agenda. If you're watching this on Air Mozilla, check out the details section. And if you're watching this on Twitch, I'm about to drop the link into the Twitch chat, except that it's not, oh man, it's not, it looks like the agenda link is busted. I remember now. I always forget this. I have to add the exported tag to Joplin. I've got a script that does the exporting, and now I just have to kick it. So, boop, boop, boop. Is that going to sync? Did that do it? Let's find out. Might have to kick it again. There it is. Okay, so here's the link to the agenda. And let me just drop this into the live hacking channel, and hopefully that ends up showing up for the folks who happen to be on Twitch. Some of these bullets are kind of formatted strangely. I'll fix it later. Let's not worry about it. All right, so I'm going to skip past the episode guide beyond just mentioning that, hey, there is an episode guide. You should check it out if you're curious about knowing about details of the things I've been working on. It's completely viewer-contributed. Viewers just like you have contributed to the episode guide, have done the majority of contributing to the episode guide. And so if you have your own notes or addenda that you want to add, send them my way. And if you're not sure how to do that, there's instructions here on how to send a pull request to the repository that hosts the episode guide. Okay, so I'm not, I think I had teased this last week, or I'd suggested that I might be in the office, the Mozilla office this week. I'm not. And the reason for that is because I need to get a better microphone for the office. Either I need to find one. I've got a couple of microphones here, but I might need to get one and have it live in the office, because I don't want to haul this one around back and forth. I've got a pretty resilient rig here, and I don't want to have to disconnect everything and move it. So I'm gonna look into that, and until I've got a decent microphone setup and camera setup in the office, I'll probably continue streaming from home. But maybe next week, I'll see what sort of equipment I can scrounge together. That's the first thing. The second thing is there is a patch that I reviewed yesterday about porting our video controls to Fluent. This is something that we had actually worked on in this series a couple of episode, many moons ago. I think it was probably episode, oh boy, when was this? I'll bet you if we look at when this got picked up by Nicholas, when did he commandeered it on April 11th. I last updated it on February 25th. So it would have been somewhere around here, February 23rd, right here. Episode 280, we were looking at this. And we'd gotten a little bit further, but my colleague Nicholas picked up the patch and has been dusting it off and basically making it work, doing the hard sort of grind work of figuring out all of the weird edge cases and solving them. Some great work from Nicholas, and I was reviewing the patch yesterday, and one of the things I noticed about it is whenever I applied it and tried to run this test, I got a crash locally. And I don't know why that is. And I want to look at that today to help supply information to Nicholas in this review and let him know what we can do about this. And whether or not it's an issue with, videocontrols.js, or maybe it's an issue in our platform, because it's a crash that's occurring due to an assertion failure right here in the support we have for what we call the shadow DOM. So let's figure out why this crash is occurring if we can. So the first step is to make sure that we can reproduce it. You know what? I thought I did a build just recently. Build with default. Why is it doing a full rebuild? That's unfortunate. I thought I had a build ready to go, and I've got my Linux build also going here. I did not expect this build to still actually be going. I expected it to have been pretty quick. So that puts a little bit of a fly in the ointment, because I thought we would be able to get here or figure this out using RR or the debugger. But while we're waiting for these builds to finish off, maybe we can do some inspection and try and figure out what's happening here. So we're just gonna look at the code and try and sort through what might be going wrong. So the crash is due to an assertion failure, and we do, assertion failures are like, you want to intentionally crash if you fail an assertion, because you don't want to have like undefined behavior if certain like things are not met, certain constraints are not met. In this particular case, we assert that a host exists for a particular element, and the assertion comes with a message that the shadow root always has a host. How did we create this shadow root if it doesn't have a host? So something is attempting to get at the host. We hit this line, there is no host, and then we crash due to the assertion failure. Get host, not very helpful. Let's see if we can find where get host is implemented. Get host. This is going to be on like element or something. Oh, so there's some questions from the audience. What is a host in this particular context? Great question. So if the shadow DOM, or maybe I should go shadow root. So if you're not I did not want to know about hair. Sorry, MDN shadow root. If you are developing web components, like custom components in the browser, you might want to consider using what's called the shadow DOM. And the shadow DOM allows you to insert content into a special region of your custom element that is not consumable, is not manipulable from the outside of that element. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm not sure if you've ever met the file input. Let's take a look at the file input for a second here. So this, if you've ever built a form on the internet that's required files, you might have used input type equals file. Now, if you look at how that is represented in the browser, Firefox, for instance, you'll see there's actually a button, and then there's some text here to say no file is selected. And if you were to choose a file, that file name would go here. Now, this is a single element in the DOM. It's called an input. But inside, there is what we call anonymous content. It's in this sort of shadow region. This button, for example, is a button element. It is a button element. That button has a tooltip that says no file selected. And then there's a label element. There's a bunch of logic here in order to wire that stuff up to open the file picker and whatnot. Now, we can't actually access the button. We can't change, for example, the label of the button. We can't change, I don't think we can change the style of the button. And that's because it's not accessible to us as the consumer of the element. Shadow root allows you to do the same thing with your own custom elements, where you can like create children and put them in the special shadow DOM region of your element that is not accessible. And in the host is if you happen to be in the shadow DOM, if you're referring to like DOM elements within the shadow DOM, the host is the containing custom element, the reference to the DOM element that the shadow root is attached to. So let's look at this example. The host read-only property of the shadow root returns a reference to the DOM element that the shadow root is attached to. So in this case, if we get access to a custom element, or in this case it's a DOM element within the shadow DOM, I guess that's the presumption, then shadow equals custom element shadow root. Oh, I see. No. So suppose this is a custom element that's got a that's got some elements within its shadow DOM. Now, suppose later we get access to the shadow root, which you can always do. The host points to the thing that the shadow root belongs to. It's kind of like it's a bidirectional pointer where shadow root gives you the root of the shadow DOM, and host on the shadow root gives you the custom element. So it points the other direction. So yeah, Smurf D was asking whether or not it has to do with like hosts in the sort of context of URLs or URIs, which would be like the www.google.com of URL, or in this case like developer.mozilla.org. And no, this is different. This is about shadow DOMs. And so, we must be attempting to get access to a shadow root, and there is none. Like maybe the element that is trying to refer to the shadow root has been disconnected from the shadow root so that there is no host. I guess that's possible. It's strange that we would crash in that particular case, but there must be a good reason, and I want to look into that. So I really want to see where get host is implemented. It might actually not be using like : get host. It might be let's turn off case sensitivity, shadow root. If I document fragment get host, mhost, is that the only implementation of get host? I guess so. Element get host. Then you get the host, which may be set. It probably defaults to null or something. And so that assertion that we're failing on, let's go back to that for a second. This was added. The last change here was just formatting. So let's look at the latest the change before that. That added stop shadow root host from being a useless function call. That was first introduced here in bug 1439223. And let's look. This is quite old. Let's see if we can pull up what the patch does. Change document fragment to use ref pointer since it's the usual style. So it looks like before we were doing this like get at the host. So it was doing a similar assertion before. And I can understand why you definitely want to assert host here, because you're about to dereference it to access a member. So that would potentially, you'd be accessing a null pointer there, null pointer dereference. That's your classic crash right there. So I can understand why you'd want to do that. But we're also checking whether or not it's an element. Let's actually take a look at the what added this original assertion. I just want to kind of understand what cases we're trying to deal with here and where those cases come from. So the way I would do that and follow this along is I would take a look at the annotation of shadow root. I think this is what I would do. I would go like annotate shadow root. I'd go one up. I'd go to the parent and get host here, and here I would be able to see, oh, I just got a tea delivery. Thank you very much. Mysterious tea delivery. Smells delicious. This is when the original implementation was, I guess. Add host and older shadow root properties to the shadow root interface way back in the day. I actually want to look at the diff, the full diff. So it looks like just sort of like a good belt and suspenders check to make sure that when we're getting access to the host, that it actually does exist. So not too many clues there. Now, is there anything about Nick's patch that tries to access the host? Like here, I can see us trying to access the host here. There are a couple of different places where we might try to access the host. But I don't know. if maybe the timing has changed such that we're trying to access the host at a bad time. It does feel strange to crash. And this wasn't in like a debug build. I believe we were, at least whenever I hit that assertion, it was not for a debug build. At least I'm pretty sure it wasn't. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. I think what we need to do is figure out what's calling host from the video controls code. And it looks like we're not quite through compiling here yet, which is really unfortunate. I had hoped that this compiling would be done by now. I'm doing 2 builds on 2 different machines. I got my host machine here doing a binary build, and I've got my Linux machine in a tower upstairs doing a binary build, mainly so that, you know, if we need to use RR, I can over here. So I'll tell you what, let's shelve this change for now, or like let's put this on pause for just a quick second, like the investigation of the crash, and instead let's take a quick peek at the other part of the patch stack here, which was to add a Fluent migration for video controls. I think this would be useful to look at. So a Fluent migration, for the folks who don't know, a Fluent migration allows us to convert the strings that we already have in the old format to the new format, so that we don't have to like have our localizers retranslate them. We do the translation ourselves via script. That's called a Fluent migration, and we've got a bunch of handy utilities that allow us to do this. And ultimately, it's a Python script that does the work. And so you tell it what the source strings, where they are, and then what you expect the output to be. And this is for everything except English, because by default the patch includes the change to the English locale. Like, we do that ourselves. So this migration is for all the other languages. Let me just do a quick side-by-side comparison here. This is what I like to do whenever I'm doing comparisons, is I'll do this, and then I'm gonna just show the right side. I guess that's fine. I was hoping that it would view unified diff. That's what I wanted. And then what I'll do is I'm gonna tear out this, sorry for the ping there. I tear that out, and then I'm gonna put this one over here, and I guess I'll have it on the left side, and we can just kind of compare and contrast. So it starts with the play button and goes and gets the play label. That looks like it makes sense. Pause button, pause label, mute button, mute label, unmute button, unmute label, enter full screen button, enter full screen label. Like, the good news is that I don't actually have to chase down these strings to make sure that the labels are correct, because there's a bunch of testing that exists for Fluent migrations to make sure that they actually produce what's expected. So like, it'll run it against the English locale and compare it against what was inserted in here, and it does a pretty good job of catching, you know, issues. Exit full screen label makes sense. Casting label, closed captions, picture-in-picture label. That's an important one for our use case here. And then here, this is more of an interesting one. Like, these ones are basically, they're very they're basically interpolating strings into the Aria labels, and that's pretty straightforward. This one has a special attribute called off label that I guess is getting manipulated. This one gets a little stranger, because the toggle label, I guess what do we need to do? We need to like copy it. Oh, sorry, no, I'm wrong. It's less to do with the toggle label. It's more about this one, which is the explainer. And that's because we have to do the interpolation of the brand short name in here. And so we have to do basically a find and replace of the old way of doing interpolation of brand short name and convert it into the new one. So it's like, okay, here's the ID of the string, and we're going to replace inside the original source string, we're going to look for at brand short name, and we're going to replace it with a reference to brand short name. And then more transforms that do target. What's target? Oh, I see. Nick is reducing how much repetition we're doing. Although, where's source being used? Source is... Where's source used? Source is used from path. I understand. Okay, let's keep going. Video controls aborted. Errors network, decode, source, no source, generic. Video controls status picture in picture. And then we have another sort of interesting one here where we have to do this interpolation. The find and replace interpolation. This is interesting. I'm not exactly the best at reading some of these. I will leave that to our Fluent reviewers who are blocking reviewers here. But I'll say that for myself, this looks good. Presuming that the... this looks good to me. Thanks. Presuming this passes the Fluent migration test. This looks good to me. Thanks. Now, we definitely still want to have the Fluent reviewers also review it, but that migration makes sense to me. Okay. Back to this crash business. Are we any closer? Okay, we've got ourselves a build here, a build ready on my Linux machine. So let's apply Nix patch here. We can do that by using mozfab. Here, I'll pump up the font so it's easier to see. So just for context, whenever it's got the U and like the stuff along the bottom, it's because I'm SSH'd into my Linux box. So I'm going to say mozfab patch, and then I give the ID, apply to here, skip dependencies. I don't want the migration. I just want the one patch. So mozfab will go get it. Okay, so we've got the patch applied, and we should have it signed out by default. So let's just build real quick, or mock build faster, so we don't have to do the whole binary rigmarole. And then the name of the test that was crashing was this one: Toolkit Content Test Widget Test Audio Controls Dimensions. Now this is one of those tests where I can do this with display, or I can do it with headless mode. And I'm curious to see whether or not that's going to cause the crash, because things like this, like testing for dimensions, I doubt it's actually going to require a display window. Like headless should be fine. Let's see what happens. And by headless, it means I don't have to actually create a top level windowing widget. It'll do it kind of in the background. And that's good because I don't have a display attached right now. I'm just SSH'd into this machine. So let's see if this causes the crash. So debug builds, a little bit slower than normal builds. That's okay. The good news is that it's producing a lot of the data that we want and need that we're going to use when we examine what's causing the crash. I'm going to try and explain some of the strategy I'm going to use while we're waiting for this. So we're on my Linux machine, presuming I can reproduce it here, and I don't see why I can't. Like I don't see why that wouldn't occur. I mean, anything's possible, but let's presume that we will be able to reproduce this crash on my Linux machine here. Then we can use RR to record a trace of the execution and reaching the crash. So we also have a test failure, and then yeah, we got our crash here. So not only is there a test failure, or not only is there a crash, there is a test failure. I think we need to focus in on the crash first. That's the higher priority. And then maybe if there's time, we can maybe look and see what's going on here. But we were able to reproduce our crash, and that's good because that means we can use RR. So here's how I do that. I'm pretty sure mock test itself doesn't take the arguments I'm about to supply, so I'm going to use mock moki test, and I say debugger equals RR. I think that's enough to do it. I think that is. We'll see whenever I execute if it says that it's using RR. Let's see. Does it say anything about RR running headless? I think I saw. Did I see anything about RR in there? Let me just go scroll back. I actually don't think RR is being used. I think I may have given it the wrong arguments. Why have somehow I've forgotten how to invoke RR, which is very strange. Is it debugger equals RR? That might be it. I think I actually have to supply the debug argument as well as the debugger argument. So I want to like end this. I also should make sure that what was it? Local share RR. This is where the traces are stored. That'll eventually, the thing that we record will eventually go here. All right, come on, debug build. I'm trying to stop you. We might have to be a little more aggressive. Oh, it's actually going to do it. Might be simpler to just wait. Oh, it does look like it was actually, it is running it. It is running it. So maybe we're okay. I didn't realize it was actually running it. So if I cd in here, the latest trace is from today. Good. Okay. So we're okay. We want this to execute. And so we hit our assertion failure. We're good. So using debugger equals RR is fine, turns out. It just wasn't immediately obvious that it was using it at first. But yes, we got our trace. So let's wait until this shuts down, and then we'll use RR to replay execution, hit our crash, and then we'll work our way backwards to see how we got there. Let's just give this a, let it finish, wrap up its thinking. Meanwhile, I've also got the build done on my host machine, on my Mac OS machine. So that is nice. Making progress. What's taking it so long? I wonder if it's writing a bunch of stuff out. I mean, I was also spamming Control-C a lot because I didn't think it was working with RR. And so I wonder if I've confused it. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds before I try again without spamming Control-C. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is a little underwhelming. I wish this wasn't taking so long. I apologize. Let me kill 112280. There we go. And is Moki test, is that still running? No. Is Firefox still running? No. Okay, we're gonna do that again. But I'm not gonna hit the Control-C. We're just gonna let it execute. Meanwhile, in the parent process, we can, or like in the my host machine, we can also mess around in here a little bit. One thing we might want to do is where the crash is occurring. which I mentioned was here inside shadow root. Shadow root.h line 76. Shadow root.h 76. We could always do something like this. If not, get host, then we can maybe print out the stack. There's a way to do that. Dump JS stack. Now we can do that within GDB. I actually don't know how we can within XP Connect. Yeah, that's what I want. Export dump JS stack. So we could try that. And we can also Moz walk the stack. I think there's a way to like just output the native stack as well. So stack, JS stack, and then native stack. Let's see what happens with that. Meanwhile, apparently there's a Danny Colin says there is a movie called Did I make that sound with my mouth? Did I go like or something? If I did, yeah, that's a habit. That's a habit. Apologies. Oh, great. Well, just changing that header required me to do a bunch of rebuilding. And it's never heard of dump.js stack. Okay, so maybe we'll you know what we can do instead? You know what we can do instead is we'll just build it this way without the JS stack. And then we can run with our native debugger attached, set a breakpoint in here, and then use dump.js stack. Oh, when I said RR multiple times, right. I have been saying RR a lot. RRRR. Makes me wonder whether or not RRs, if they should have a mascot that's like a pirate. I think that'd be fun. Okay, so having to make that change to the native code, unfortunately changing a header, especially if that header is used in a bunch of different places, might require a bunch of recompilation. Hilarious. You know what else I could have done, actually, is I could have used a conditional breakpoint. Yeah, that probably would have been smarter. If I had done a conditional breakpoint, in fact, let's take advantage of SC cache, which already knows about how to build all the old things. So this will be faster. I'll use the native debugger to set a conditional breakpoint of entering here where get host is null. And if that's the case, then we break. That might be better. And we should be getting some good SC cache performance here because this is the way the tree was before. We should be hitting the cache a lot. Yes, we are. Cache hit, cache hit. So building is much faster because I'm hitting the cache so much. Meanwhile, how's our Linux machine doing? Still figuring it out. Taking it forever. Why is it taking, like, I guess it's like unwinding. It's interesting, we do have the native stack being dumped here. That's really useful, actually. This is part of what we wanted. And so, perhaps unsurprisingly, I can tell that there's JavaScript on the stack, and I'd like to know what that is. But the other thing of interest is that earlier in the stack, you can see that there's an async function being resumed. Some async JavaScript function, some awaiting, some promise is resolving, and await is being fulfilled, and so a function is being resumed, and it's in there that we're trying to access a host. And I do know that one of the number of the changes in here has to do with async functions. Like this onSetup function, for example, was made async. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it might help explain, you know, why we might be attempting to get at the host after maybe the host has gone away in the test. I guess that's possible. Which makes me think that maybe there's like a platform bug here. Like if it's possible to recreate this issue and reliably crash the browser by like trying to access, you've got like a shadow DOM node and you try and access the host on resumption of something. If we go further up the stack, what's causing the resumption? Some JavaScript thing is resolving a promise. So yeah, I do really want to know what is on the JS stack. So we have to unfortunately wait for this to finish getting itself together. We might be able to do that too here in our in the parent in my host machine. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do mock run. No, not mock run. I want the test, and the test was mock such and such. This thing. Mock Moki test here. Now I can't use RR on Mac OS, so I'm going to use is debugger equals Lldb. And I don't know if I actually have to supply dash debug. I think it knows, if I've given it a debugger, it knows that I want to debug. And so let's see what it thinks of this. Why is everything so slow? It's like 2 minutes between this step and this step. Let me just see where all the activity is right now. Where's all my CPU being used? OBS, unsurprisingly. Oh, do I have... I think I have my VM still on. Let me shut that down. I have a VMware VM that was on, probably consuming more memory than I needed it to. Okay, so that's shut down. That's good. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set a conditional breakpoint. Lldb conditional breakpoint. I have to remember what the format is because I'm used to GDB. Breakpoint set name foo condition, and then in quotes you put your condition. Okay, so in this case foo is probably the symbol, the function symbol. So in this case it's shadow root. It's element. Is that shadow root get host? And what's the namespace that we're in? DOM. Mozilla DOM shadow root. Shadow root get host condition. And do we implement document fragment? We do. So we should be able to get access to the mhost member. So mhost equals null pointer. Okay, now it says no locations because we actually haven't loaded the binary yet, but we're going to run now. It wants my super secret password for my machine. Okay. Meanwhile, man, this is not a good sales pitch for RR. I really don't know why it's taking this long. Like, I've been waiting for this thing to wrap up for like several minutes now. And the content process crashed. I'm pretty sure we hadn't. Why is native stack in there? Why didn't we hit our breakpoint? Maybe we didn't hit our breakpoint because... Can I run the test again? Can I go like reload? Okay, I'm gonna break here and I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna break on get host. Oh, yeah, it has no idea what I'm talking about. Also, it's the content process that appears to be crashing, which is maybe not surprising. Like, I'm in the wrong process whenever I'm trying to like set this breakpoint. That's an interesting thing to note, is that like it's the content process that's crashing, not the parent process. And so I actually think what I need to do, this is tricky. I need to like wait for have the test wait attached to the content process. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit trickier than I thought. Let's first of all, build, and then we're going to go to the test, which is test audio controls dimensions. The very first thing we're going to have it do after it loads is we're going to have it wait. Await new promise, resolve, set timeout. We want to wait enough time for me to attach the debugger. That should wait for 25 seconds. That's enough time for me to get the process ID and attach the debugger, and then run the thing. So let's prepare ourselves. I'm going to create a new shell here. We're going to open up doop-a-doop-doop-a-doop-a-doop. We're going to get Lldb all ready to go. And I'm going to be ready to type in the process ID. Here, let's pump up the font here as well. We're going to run this thing. We're going to turn debugger off. We don't actually need it in this particular case because we're going to be debugging a content process, not the parent process. And this is as like my way of debugging content processes. Okay, so the process ID is 95481. 95481. We're attaching. And then we want to set that breakpoint. Break Mozilla DOM shadow root get host. And you know what? Let's not even get a condition. So it's interesting. It's never heard of this. Let's see what happens. Continue. Aha! So we hit a breakpoint. I think we hit a breakpoint. Bad access. Zulk stopped. I'm very confused. Where is native stack coming from? Because I removed that from shadowroot.h. Like I had that in here originally, and then I saved, and for some reason it's still showing the string. It's very strange. what is our trace here? We're in get host. Let's go up to get wrapper inlined. Step. This is tricky because the code has been optimized, so I can't actually figure out. Get wrapper may be dead. Wrapper preserve color. Because this is optimized C++ code, I have a feeling what happened was that the function I was attempting to break on, this get host thing, had been inlined. What's your issue? Okay, this thing is clearly not terminating. What happens if I kill it and then attempt to replay? Yeah, can't do it. What is going wrong? I don't know what is up with RR, but for some reason in this particular case it really doesn't want to like complete. So that's not good. That's going to make investigating this a lot harder. I'm also very confused about why I'm seeing that native stack thing. So quit. I'm gonna exit out of everything here. So we've got that one change to add our timeout, and I'm using default. Gonna build. I really don't know where that native stack thing is coming from, unless somehow it was part of. No, it wasn't part of Nick's patch. It's very mysterious. What I want to do is I want to break in the content process when I get here and see what's on the JS stack. That's what I really, really want. Now, part of the issue is that I am part of the issue is that the function is being inlined. And the condition didn't appear. You know, I wasn't even really using the condition, was I? But even if I did, I wasn't able to like get. Maybe I could have dumped the JS stack while I was there. You know, I made the assumption that I couldn't dump the JS stack, but maybe I could totally do that. Let's run that exercise again. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going in circles here. And for some reason, this terminal is broken. So, what? Thank you. Okay, so what is the process? 99370. And now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to attach a breakpoint. I'm just going to let it crash. And then I'm going to try and dump the JS stack. Boom. Okay. Hit our break. Hit our crash. Dump JS stack. Here we go. Here we go. So inside the init method, line 3246 of video controls. 3246. We're trying to get the host here on init, and that's in the on setup 3314. down here in this async on setup function. So we attempt to generate the content, and then we get to this point, and by like somehow by the time we get here, the shadow host, the shadow root host is gone, and attempting to access it fails inside of the no controls desktop impl widget. This one does have controls, by the by. What are you talking about? Who calls on setup? Here. When we attach the binding, we call on setup. So now what I'm going to do, because we don't have the help of RRs, I'm going to do a little bit of logging. How do you get the name of a class? Class foobar. Foobar name. Yeah, okay. So what I'll do is I'll say dump constructing new impl.name, and then calling setup for new impl.name, and then can you do the same thing with instances of the class, like let f equals new foobar f dot like class or constructor dot name? Yeah, okay. If not such and such return dump failed to destruct due to no impl, destroying this impl constructor dot name, and then this on setup business. Now the one that we're worried about is the one in 3314. What? 3246. I think I've moved some lines around. So it's inside the init function, and that attempts to get the host here. Running init for this class. And then what else are we going to say? Dump starting on setup for such and such. Dump done generating content for such and such. Okay, let's run this again. We're going to quit. We got the information we got out of the debugger. That's all I wanted. So now we can get rid of the wait, and let's run again. Okay. Blah blah blah. So I really am curious of where this native stack is coming from. I guess I should just look to see shadow root binding get host. Somehow I've like walk the stack moz walk, like somehow I've kept this in here in the binary, which is very bizarre. But regardless, what happens is we finish translating the roots. We're like setting up a no controls desktop impl. Entering check audio height, add control sync. So we entered this part of the test where we create a new audio element. We append it to the document and we call on setup. We remove the child right here. Okay. Okay. Because we start destroying it here. And we destroy before we finish translating the roots. And that's the problem. Destructor. Terminate. Disconnect the root. So basically, you almost want to like abort. So the thing is that translate roots is asynchronous. My understanding is that it's not possible to do synchronous translation. They all return promises. And so we like do the translation. No controls. And we remove it before the translation can complete. But despite that, like generate content, I guess. Well, first of all, generate content does not currently this does not need to be, this does not return a promise. That's the first thing to note. Maybe others do. Maybe that's the reason. Yeah, the one that does have controls, I'll bet you that one, the one that has things that we need to translate, I can imagine that one. Oh, sorry, I was in the wrong spot. Yes, this one, the desktop impl widget. So we generate the content, we do await for it here, and that's because it does want to translate it. And I guess even if the node has been removed at this point, the promise will still resolve. But we should probably only do this init stuff. Like we should probably add a check here to make sure that we're still connected to the DOM. The host is null. How do you make sure that? How do we avoid this in the like, is this a problem in general with custom elements? That's my next question. We can actually test that. I really want to touch this file. build. And while we're waiting for that, let's see if we can generate a simple test case where we we create an element. So let's define a new custom element. Class my element extends element. Is that how? Oh, hang on. I gotta do this in JS land. I have to remember how to do this. Custom elements extends. Sure, paragraph element sounds good. Let's just use this example. Class such and such extends paragraph element. In the constructor, what we're going to do is we are going to do, can I do a set timeout? After 1 second, we'll try and get at this shadow root host, or timeout. Or is it a matter of, you know what it is? I'll bet it's a matter of this this like binding thing, this like this instance of a class outliving the DOM node. Widget. And you pass the shadow root out of it. Okay, so constructor, we're going to say like class shadow root rememberer. Constructor shadow root. And then what we'll do is do thing this.shadowroot.host. This.shadowroot equals shadow root. So that'll hold on to it. And then what we're going to do constructor set timeout 1000. So we'll say G rememberer equals new shadow root rememberer. And then we need to get access to the shadow root. Open or closed shadow root equals, how do we get at the shadow root? They're passed it in the constructor. New impl shadow root equals the constructor of the video controls widget, which comes from I think that this is kind of the guts of it. It's all about the UA widget funkiness and what keeps it alive. So I suspect this actually will not be reproducible, but just in case, do we have access to open or closed shadow root? Document body shadow open. I'm just gonna say shadow root. G rememberer do thing. Console log shadow root host. Okay, and then we'll say let x equals new word count, document body append child x, x.remove. All right, let's see what happens. See if this crashes my browser. I doubt it will. Yeah, nothing gets logged. Like constructed. Error. It does hit an error of some kind. 19. Oh. Concise methods is available. I don't understand what it's complaining about. Error word count on line 19. Oh, this .shadow root. That's why. Still doesn't like it. Console log doing the thing. What's your problem? Is it how? What's your problem? It's not even after the 5 seconds. It's hang on. Where is getting pretty bizarre error messages here. Oh, that's what I want. I've only got errors, logs turned on. That's what's going wrong. Must call super construct. Oh, of course. That's what it's complaining about. Super. Oh, super. All right, run. Oh, this is not a derived one, of course. Illegal constructor on line 18. Why is that an illegal constructor? Why is that an illegal constructor? Still an illegal constructor. Why is that an illegal constructor? Type error, illegal constructor. What are you talking about? Oh, sorry. It's not this constructor. My line numbers are all wrong here. All of this is wrong. I'm getting confused by incorrect line numbers. It's here. I can't create a new word count because I haven't registered the. Presumably, I can't append it to the custom element. Custom elements dot register. Oh, define rather. Define. Then we need to call like word count. And then will that do it? Still hates it. Oh, there's also, I have to supply, if it's, can I just do that? Just call it a day. Does it really need to extend? Yeah, it does, because it needs shadow root. HTML element, is that enough? Thank goodness. Okay, shadow root is not defined. That I can deal with. Shadow root, yes, here. I got rid of the thing. All right. Constructed, doing the thing. Can't access property host, shadow root is null. So in this particular case, shadow root is null because constructor constructed. What is shadow root here? Null. How do I open up a shadow root? Shadow root. Oh, I think there's like an invocation to like create one. You have to say like, hey, give me a shadow root. Attach shadow? Yeah. Let's see an example of it being used. This dot attach shadow mode. That's what it is. Okay. This dot shadow root equals this dot attach shadow open. Okay. Setting getter only property shadow. So that's, I guess, a privileged name. Constructed shadow. Okay. Okay. So it's still able to get access to it even though it was removed from the document. So I suspect this is less to do with like it's more to do with how weird UA widgets are, which is a special type of insertion into the shadow DOM that we use for video controls and audio controls. So, what are ways around this? Like for now, just to get things moving, we might want to file a bug for UA widgets child to make sure that like the shadow root is always kept alive to avoid this crash cases, to make sure that the shadow root and the implementation, they're bound to one another, so that if one's alive then the other one stays alive. But in the meantime, we might be able to get around this by checking for the existence seeing if we've been destroyed. Maybe that's one way of doing it. Seeing if we've been destroyed. Utils terminate, for example. What does that do? Terminate. We remove a bunch of listeners. Like, if we do like this dot destroyed equals false, and then down in the destructor of this util destructor terminate. How do we access? Man, the scoping is so weird in this thing. What's this shadow root? Okay, well, maybe then what we want is like this dot destroyed equals true. And then inside on setup, if this dot destroyed, then return. Now this is just a band-aid to see if this will help. I'm very curious to see if this will help. Okay. Looks like we still get a crash. Crashed. Content process crash. Was the crash on? Destroying, done translating roots, running a init. It still runs a init. That's surprising. So we didn't actually change anything. Destroyed. Dump. Bailing out. Very curious. Okay. Destroying. I don't see the destroyed. So there's terminate and then there's destructor. Destroying, then you call impl destructor. Destroying, and then there's just like blank here. Destroying this impl. Yeah. This impl. Destroyed. Destroyed. And if that's failing, maybe I'll do like destroying, dump, destroyed. What's going wrong here? We're going to figure it out, people. We're going to figure it out. Destroying. Here. I think something goes wrong. I don't think we properly... I think terminate fails. Running terminate. Dump rutrow. File name. Line number. This is not the best debugging session I've ever done. I'm doing a lot of printf debugging, and I'm doing a lot of guessing and poking around. So I apologize if anyone was hoping for something really fancy here. Destroying the simple, destroying. Actually never enters here. Destroying this utils. Utils defined? Not necessarily, because utils is up here. Aha. If this dot utils. So that's a thing to keep in mind. Destroyed. Calling on set of destroyed. Bailing out. And then it finishes translating the roots. And then it crashed anyways. In the content process. Like, you kind of want to abort the translation once the thing goes away. DOM localization, DOM Eltonet, translate roots. What do we have that's privileged? it's ready and when to connect it. We don't have a lot of I'm starting to worry that translate. How do you migrate off of dot properties? I'm starting to worry that the asynchronous nature of using Fluent in this particular way is what's burning us here. I want to see something. There is a way we get the strings. Brand.ftl. Yeah, this is an example of how we can get localization and then to do synchronous translation. And we might have to do this. Instead of using like data L10N stuff, or like the reason we need to use like we have to connect the root and then we tell it to translate them. And we have to wait. Like, is the waiting the bad part? What happens if we don't await it? Just out of curiosity. What happens if we don't await it? Like, we might fail a bunch of tests. That I can believe. But I'm just curious what happens if we don't await. Does the crash still occur? Because maybe we need an invariant here where like, no, it still crashes. Maybe it's in a different part of the test too. Pass, height, it leaves test here, auto control sync. Which is down here. Let's only run that. Destroys the implementation. I have a feeling this is what happens whenever the Fluent system asynchronously attempts to translate. This might be a Fluent crash. No. A different one here. Layers within layers. I'm starting to wonder whether we need to introduce an invariant where these on setup functions do need to be synchronous. To avoid this crash for now. And then maybe we can work with the DOM team or the Fluent team to figure out why this crash is occurring. Okay, so there we go. Nope, still crashing. What the heck? And is it this one? Done trans. Is it this guy? What is going on? All right. One more attempt to get a stack here for this particular failure. Lldb. Come on, do it. Attach. Okay. What a struggle. What is going on here, people? Okay, so 15225. Smurfd notes that it kind of feels like it happens after everything's done. I think you're right. I think this is some kind of like cleanup or like something. Maybe 25 may have been too long. Oh, wait. Oh, of course. Well, maybe I can still run this and get the same effect. No? Oh, we did. Okay. Call dump JS stack. In this case, it's the init line 2488. Here inside of the controls instance of the widget. Right, because we add controls in this test. We set controls to 2. Makes sense. And then we do this thing where we run such a long function on setup, and then on line 2488. So on setup runs, and then we call init, and that's called from on setup 2794. This stuff. Okay. Does this? Wait, hold on. I gotta get rid of that timeout, and that's breaking the test anyways with an await that shouldn't be there. Does this get rid of the crash? And if so, then I have at least a little bit of information to give Nick. Okay. Not only does that get rid of the crash, it also causes the test to pass. So that's interesting. And what have we done? We've just removed all of the translation stuff. And I think the issue here is that we need to like what I suspect we need to do, or this particular crash is dealing with, is that the translation stuff here, which calls into a init, like this stuff is still resolving. I don't think the actual translation is the problem. I think it's the calling init afterwards, even after the node's gone away, and we still have the shadow root hanging around. And do we have like a destructor? Also, what's the difference between this translate roots and the one that was happening up here? That's confusing. Connect root. Why do we have to translate again? Okay, let me add that to our notes here. So the time has come to write some findings. In this review for Nick. Element state matches, like here. So my first question is like why we needed to do this translation when we already do a translation way up elsewhere. Don't we have here. We already do one here. Do we actually need to do the translation route again? Didn't we already run? Didn't we already run translate routes inside of generate content? Why do we need to run it again? So let's suppose we don't have to run it again. Let's put all of this back. And instead, we don't do that here. We make this stuff happen synchronously. What happens now? We pass. Now there is an exception being thrown here on line 501 about control not being an object, so that's worth considering. But we pass. Now that doesn't mean we've actually fixed things. We may have actually horribly broken other stuff, but I'm curious what happens if, for example, I run test video controls. Let's run this whole directory and see what happens, just out of curiosity. Those all looked okay. Those all passed. So I have a feeling we can, and let's run this build. Let's take a look at the video controls themselves and see what they look like. HTML5 video. Let's look at some examples. We have tooltips. Do we have tooltips? I don't think we have tooltips, but that's okay. Like, I don't think that's what it's Aria labels is what we're looking for. Accessibility. Pause, position, mute. Yeah, like all of those strings are there. That's what we're looking for. I have a feeling this might be the solution, at least to move us forward. And then we need to like file some follow-up bugs. I think we can get away with having this, with not calling it and calling init and all the rest synchronously here. I think what's I did some digging today, and I think the crash is mainly related to how was it on setup or on setup. Where's my comment? Is how on setup has been made async, and how it or one of the functions that it calls can try to access the shadow root host after the element has been removed from the DOM. This is because the translate roots function can resolve after the destructor on this UA widget is called. Kind of wacky. So what I suggest is making sure that on setup is synchronous. We can still, it seems like we can still do the translate roots, but we shouldn't wait for them to resolve to continue executing on setup, if possible. Were there other tests that we had to worry about when we were working on this thing? I think it was mainly these ones, like the ones under toolkit content test widgets. There was another test that had to be manipulated, video controls direction test. But that should have been taken care of from the directory that we just ran, which is test video controls and audio, like the video direction and audio direction. So it sounds like those are working. So I have a feeling that might be the way forward here. I think that'll let us sidestep the crash. It might be worth filing a separate bug with the DOM team about UA widgets and video controls in particular, noting how they seem to be very fragile with respect to lifetimes. Like, I wasn't able to reproduce this with a normal custom element, but I suspect that UA widgets live in this kind of liminal space where it's possible to keep a shadow root alive even when its host has gone away, and that's why we're hitting the assertion failure. Possible to keep a shadow root alive. Its host has gone away. That's right. The assertion failure. Okay. So I think that's what I'm going to submit to Nicholas. I'm surprised we were able to get some findings here. But this is, it was an hour and a half of digging around, but this was ultimately what we found out. So there you go. Wrote a review comment for Nicholas, and I will link to that here. We didn't get to this. We'll try and get to this next week. Someone had talked about maybe looking at that during last week's episode, but this one was more important. So sadly to say, this will have to wait one more week. I wanted to highlight there will be no episode on April 27th because I will be attending a conference. I highly encourage you to check this conference out with me. It's called It Will Never Work in Theory, and the website is here, neverworkintheory.org. It's software researchers doing lightning talks on subjects that are highly relevant to software developers, like the hidden costs and benefits of test-driven development, how your minds learn to program, the effects of destructive criticism in code review, how code review works and doesn't work in the real world, how to test software without writing tests, to search or not to search, it depends on the question. What does productivity actually mean for developers? Like, these are, I think, very applicable subjects, and they're only I think it's 5 seconds, or not 5 seconds, 5 minutes lightning talks. They're really short, easy to digest. All of the money raised for ticket sales goes to Books for Africa. It's just a good thing to do. There are 2 sessions to try and be flexible with time zones, and you should definitely check this out. So neverworkintheory.org. The link is here in the agenda. I also want to plug some great content. There's a podcast. One of my colleagues is associated with this learning institution called Launch School, which if you're just learning how to program, or if you want to learn how to program, this is a great, I've never taken this course. I've never taken this program, but I know someone who has and speaks so highly of it. And I think there are actually 2 people in my current sphere of working who have gone through this program, and they've come out just amazing. And it's not just here's some tutorials on how to program, but it's really rigorous learning how to learn, how to be curious, how to dig in, mastery, learning through mastery. It's, I think it's really good stuff. So I'm not being sponsored by Launch School or anything like that. I just know that there are a number of people in my current sphere who speak very highly of it, and you should check it out. They have a podcast if you want to listen to them talking about the sort of stuff that they do, as well as some of the philosophy around learning. One of my colleagues was a host during season 3, and they'd talk about let's see here, stages of learning at different life stages. Maybe I think there was this one might have to do with students in Launch School who are there's one who's maybe still in high school, there's one who's in their 30s, and there's one who's in their 60s, and they talk to each different student to kind of get their perspective on learning at that particular time. Talking about learning how to learn, how fundamentals make all the difference. Barbara Oakley was being interviewed here. Barbara Oakley is I think she's a researcher in, I don't remember what she researches. She's got her PhD in something, professor of engineering, but has written a number of books on learning, how to learn, pedagogy almost. So I highly recommend checking those out. And that interview with Barbara Oakley is particularly interesting. Ways you can train yourself to learn and motivate yourself to learn. I wish I'd listened to or read some of these books. I've just picked up Learning How to Learn, and I've got A Mind for Numbers in my back catalog. And I wish I'd read these before I'd gone to university, or even I wish I'd read them in high school. It's very interesting strategies for learning. I also wanted to shout out Felicia Bacon, who is a streamer on YouTube who has a lot of interesting live hacking streams as well as interviews. Things like here, we're going to solve multiples of 3 or 5 in Ruby. We're going to solve reversing arrays, checking for duplicates. So it's like fundamentals, again, fundamentals, and like the journey of becoming a software engineer at launch school and interviewing other people at launch school and meeting, talking about the pros and cons of launch school. It's all good stuff. So I want to plug Felicia Bacon as well, a current student at launch school, and apparently they're doing a new video every other Monday. That's pretty great. There was a question here, real quick. Could you please give an explanation for the points field under the categories in Bugzilla? And then they gave a link. Here, let's see if we can take a look at this. Points. So this, points. What does points mean? Great question. There's no entry for it in the wiki. So points is being... Bugzilla has a lot of different fields for things that... Here, let me step back for a second. Bugzilla is used by lots of different teams that have lots of different ways of approaching their work. One way of approaching work is by doing estimation using what we call story points. Some people refer to them as like the Fibonacci points, because the points values are, at least the ones we use here, are numbers like the first 6 numbers from the Fibonacci sequence. And the reason for that is it's supposed to represent how, as something gets more and more difficult, it becomes less clear how difficult a thing is, the more difficult it seems. And so this is a rating of both how difficult something is and how much work it will be, like how quickly it can be done. I actually think it has more to do with difficulty and less to do with like time. I don't know how much time is a factor. It really depends from team to team, but I kind of consider it an amalgam of the two, like time to do it as well as complexity. And so as a team, some teams will set points so that they can sort of get a sense of their velocity by doing estimates. Like if this is how, if the team can do a total of 20 points in a week, then it's easier for them to sort of figure out what sort of work they can do in the future. Like they can start to graph that and make better estimates of like, okay, here's our velocity. Here is how much work we think we can get done. This one's too big. We're going to swap that out for this. Or because we definitely need to do this big one, we can't do all these small ones. And it helps to sort of set expectations. So it's a way of it's like a sort of a cheap and easy formalized way of doing estimates using what we call points. And not every team uses them. You're not going to see points being used on every single bug ever. But on some teams that are using points, that's what it means. It's a rating of how difficult or time consuming something is going to be. And a 5 is like, this is maybe a couple of days of effort, maybe a week or so, and I might need to talk to some people on other teams to sort of figure this out. A 3 is like, this will take me a day or two. A 2 is, this will take me a day. A 1 is, this, I can do this maybe in a half hour, an hour. 2 might be a day or half a day or something like that. So that's kind of the scale. It's like, I can knock this off in an hour. It's just this little string change. This is, okay, I have to like swap in some assets and write some tests. 3 is, okay, I have to like fix this bug in this component that I know very well. 5 is, okay, there's this kind of big nebulous thing. I don't really understand how to do it, but I'm going to talk to some other people. I think I can handle it, but it might take me like a week. 8 is, okay, this is going to take a couple weeks. We need to do like a serious breakdown of like how things are going and like maybe coordinate amongst multiple teams. 13 is, this is a major like ticket that needs to probably be broken down into smaller tickets. It's, this is a big project and it's going to take many weeks. That's what points mean. All right. Oh, that's my alarm going off, I think, telling me that I need to end my stream because I got a meeting coming up. Thank you so much for watching episode 286 of The Joy of Coding. I hope that was interesting. I will see you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
The joy of coding.
See ya.